Well, folks, let me. I'm just looking at a little pop-up that came up on my screen right now. I'm reading it. Um, Wish they would have actually done that before I started the live screen. So I'm going to close that for now. They're asking whether I want to add a moderator to the live chat. Well, let's go ahead and get started. Right now, it is currently here in Illinois 12:55 on the 15th of June, which is Father's Day here in Albany. For those of you who may be viewing in other parts of the world, it is 18:55 UTC. And as I promised in a earlier post, we're going to discuss accepting responsibility for treatment. A little bit of background first. I'm 63 years old. I'm a single white male, and I collect Social Security benefits. And I have since the determination was made in 2009, going back to about 2007. I've been much blessed to have those benefits. And I try to mind the money that I receive very carefully. Recently, however, as a continue, how can I put it? In order to continue driving as a result of my disability, I have to submit a review form that is filled out and then submitted to the Illinois Secretary of State's office in their driver's analysis division. This review form is meant to ensure that I'm safe to drive. Driver safety is something that I take very seriously. I have all my life. I was taught very well beginning with my mother, who herself was an excellent driver and was a great teacher and a great mentor. Well, I take that little form pretty seriously, and I also take the obligations that I have to the individuals that sign it very seriously, as I do my obligations to all the other people on the road and beside the road. It's just a matter of respect. Well, as it turns out, one of the caregivers was reluctant and could determine that something was wrong with me. It wasn't something so much with my mental state of mind as it was something physical. So that meant that I had to go and find a primary care physician, a standard GP type, to run tests and make evaluations. Usually these things are pretty easy. You don't even have to get entirely disrobed. They basically check for a pulse, see if you're breathing, you can walk around, your cognition is halfway decent, then you're good. Well, till she checked for the pulse part. And ever since the COVID times, I've myself noticed that I couldn't hear my heart beat, which is in itself kind of a scary thing. Well, I had gone to the Carl Outpatient Clinic here in Albany and saw a nurse practitioner there. And she noted that I had an irregular heartbeat. My father had told me a little bit about this back when I was in my early 20s. maybe as early as when I was a teenager, that a good condition known as arrhythmia tachycardia afflicted him, and that it basically meant that your heart from time to time might skip a beat or kick an additional one in. So I was aware of it. By the time I reached my late 20s, I had already driven several million miles and was kind of involved in the field of aviation as a member of the Prairie Aviation Museum. And they were a forward-thinking organization, and they kind of encouraged me to get my pilot's license. And of course, I began taking lessons. But before you can solo, even as a private pilot, a flight surgeon has to make an examination. And when that flight surgeon did, he detected the arrhythmia tachycardia. And he said, well, you can fly private, but you can't fly commercial. I had already witnessed several incidents, including a fatality that happened in front of me of a friend. And I knew in that moment that I owed it not only to myself, but to everyone else, to ground myself. Nonetheless, there were other pilots who still wanted me to fly. And I was invited to accompany another doctor and Ethel Joan Scheffler, who was regarded as the single best flight instructor alive in the Midwest. Herself a pioneer, an aviation pioneer, and patriot. And I went up with this doctor and Ethel, quite humbled. And then after we completed our touch and goes and the review of this doctor's ability to fly, I was asked if I would still be interested in continuing to fly. And I said no. I said, simply put, the last thing that we need up there is just another joker up joyriding when the skies around Bloomington Normal and Central Illinois are already so crowded. Now, fast forward. Since that time, I've accumulated a total of over 4 million miles in terrestrial transportation, meaning driving, without accident or without having any kind of a violation on my record. That is highly unusual. Doesn't mean I'm a great driver. It just meant, well, the angels were watching over me. But I was aware of that. And I was especially aware of that when I had to take that form in for the physical evaluation. And as I said, the physician or nurse practitioner who made the examination noted that I had an irregular heartbeat. My father, before me, who passed in 2015, watched his arrhythmia tachycardia eventually developed into full-blown atrial fibrillation. And I knew that my day was coming, and coming soon. So she asked if I would take a brief test with an electrocardiograph, which I agreed to. And as the result of that electrocardiograph, she immediately put me on some medication and asked me if I would go to the cardiac unit at Richland Memorial Hospital, which is also operated by the Carl Foundation. I did. And the diagnosis was made that I have full-blown AFib. I knew immediately, right there, that within less than 2 weeks, when my driver's license expired, that I would surrender it and, simply put, get a state ID card. And with the help of my good friend of mine, even though it's less than 6 blocks from my house to the Secretary of State's office, where in Illinois you renew your driver's license, he drove 35 miles to pick me up at my house, take me those 6 blocks so I could surrender my driver's license and then back home, because I didn't want to screw up my record. I didn't want to screw up my record because I owe it to everybody else. It's not a matter of pride. It's actually a matter of humility. I didn't want to hurt anybody. I know now that at any given moment, my heart could stop, or that I could suffer a stroke. Some people were thinking I'm overreacting. Well, maybe I am. But the last thing that I want to be is one of those people that just simply went on ahead in life and said, damn everybody else, I'm going to keep driving. I have a perfect driving record. And then lose consciousness at the wheel, and then either be found dead in a ditch in their vehicle, or worse, drift across the center line and possibly crash into an oncoming car and take the occupants of that vehicle out with me. That's not my style. As I'm fond of saying, after I found out about this diagnosis, the angel spoke to me and God said, okay, Bruno, 4 million miles, enough is enough. Let's give the angels a break. So it is. Now, after this evaluation and such, and me being placed on the medication, I received a bill from Carl Hospital System. And the bill was itemized, but it didn't seem correct, because I also received a bill from Boston Scientific regarding the Holter monitor that I was required to wear for 48 hours as a part of the test at the cardiology department. When I called Boston Scientific and questioned the bill and how little it was, they said, yeah, that's it. Well, that same charge had been made by Carl for the same device. Interesting. This and several other discrepancies in the fact that both Carl and Medicare use two entirely different explanations and record their information in such different manners that is mind-boggling for the average or sub-average, as I am, human being to be able to evaluate, led me to a great deal of concern about fraud and abuse in the Medicare system. Now, to be clear here, I do not have Part D insurance, nor do I have supplemental insurance. My intention was and is to be financially responsible for my own medical debt. And should the time arise when I can't afford to pay those debts, to stop accepting treatment, thus bypassing the insurance conglomerates and the inefficiencies that are there. I figure I owe that much to everybody else. Because those charges that Carl make, they wouldn't have come to me. They would have gone to the insurance companies. And of course, the insurance companies would have refused them initially, most likely. And even if they had accepted them, those premiums are ultimately paid by everybody else, not me. Kind of like the Social Security benefit that I already received. Yeah, there's people that'll say, you paid into the system, this is your money, you're taking it back. Well, if that's the case, I know that a long time ago, the amount that I began to receive far exceeded what I had kicked in. And I've tried to make myself as useful as I can in very small ways. And tried to benefit my community and my nation. So back to the thing about Carl. Last month, according to the date on the statement, Carl revised the amount that I owed them and tacked on to the original $300 and some odd charge another charge of over $800. When I settled down, I contacted Carl's billing department and asked for an explanation. And the first clerk that I spoke with basically explained that for each visit, each diagnosis, each stage, Carl creates a separate account under the patient's name. It's an internal thing, she said. But immediately I became concerned. Why suddenly was this not being billed to the original account? Or why is it being billed to the original account under a separate account? Over $800 and some odd. I explained to the clerk that I found it interesting and that I would be calling back. And after a period of somewhere between 35 and 45 minutes, I did call back. And I spoke to a different clerk. I explained to her what I had heard and asked her to give me justification as to why this is done. Why is it that they create a second account and then bill the first, which ultimately I am responsible for. She simply explained that this is how it's done in-house. This is how their accounting system works. And then I asked her, well, why wasn't this information placed on the first bill? I was under the assumption that once I paid that bill in full, the account would be reconciled. And she explained that it had to be submitted to Medicare and that it was several times and rejected. That's interesting. You see, medical billing and coding, as they call it, gets real complex real quick. And it gets over the heads of those of us who are somewhat less than average in our ability to comprehend such complexities. I have a friend of mine who is an accountant who has worked in the medical field. I don't dare take it to him because he's a kind and giving man, and this would cause him angst. So I got to thinking, and I told the second clerk that this is a burden. I don't think it's right. And then she recommended that I applied for financial aid. That was the wrong button to push. And I told her, no. Why should I kneel to Carl Foundation and their hospital and ask for financial assistance when I do have the capabilities to pay this bill myself? Just like the medical treatment and the expertise that's been extended to me, there are a great many others in this region who need both the resources of the hospital and the technicians and the doctors and also the financial aid. I told her that Carl will receive that $800 and some odd. So help me God. But it doesn't mean that I have to come back to a Carl facility and that I wouldn't. Now I'd like to tell you why. According to Wikipedia and ProPublica, the Carl Foundation revenue for 2023 was over $4.3 billion with a B dollars, of which 42% came from health insurance premiums. The top three directors, the president and CEO, James C. Leonard, who's a physician, the chief operating officer, Matthew Kolb, and the chief finance and strategy officer, Dennis Hesh. These three individuals alone at the Carl Foundation, which operates the Carl Hospital system, receive an annual compensation This is combined their salaries and other compensation. According to ProPublica, of 9,390,407. This is what they received in 2023. 9,390,407. Just the top three. If they think for a second that I'm going to apply to these men for charity, no. I think they need to find charity in their own hearts. I think they need to take and turn some of that money back into the system, not in the form of charity, but in the interest of lowering the initial bills. They have no right, they have no justification for my ability, or for trying to attempt to take away my ability to contribute to other charities, and then take credit for the charitable outreach that they gave to me. Each of us would be nothing if we were not the recipients of God's love. Some of us go to church every Sunday in order to hear His word. Others listen to the radio or to music. With me, I admit my walk is a little different. I will be paying that bill out of the love that God has entrusted me to extend to others. Not because I feel an obligation to the Carl Foundation and its hospital system, because God commissioned me to shepherd this little vessel that I call my body, that it may benefit others. Not that it makes me any more worthy, because I'm not. I've made plenty of screw-ups myself in my life. But simply because the glory belongs to God, not to me. But at the same time, I know that what I'm going to do by conserving resources and, well, submitting to the extortion of these wealthy individuals might benefit other families, but the glory for it does not belong to me. It belongs to Heavenly Father and to Christ. I know that these decisions will shorten my life. But let's face it, folks, ever since 2006, pretty much, I've been doing precious little more than taking up time, space, and gravity. Life has been good, don't get me wrong. I have some wonderful and amazing friends. And I admit, some of the people that care for me are absolutely exceptional. But they weren't the people that cared for me or could care for me when the diagnosis of atrial fibrillation was made. Nor when the bills came due. I know they're praying for me. And I've told them that I love them for that. And I'm humbled by that. But they have to understand, I'm a 63-year-old single white male. No family is dependent on me alone. I am much blessed by the resources that I receive. The money I receive from everyone in the United States as they pay their Social Security taxes, and it flows through the system. And then the check is written out to me each month. But there's nothing really in the way of legacy for me to pass on. This branch of the Biava family tree and the Bunn family tree ends here. And my fate with that was determined by factors that were in play even before I was born. I've done my best, but I'm very disappointed in what I'm seeing. Now, the world isn't a perfect place, and I get that. But it doesn't mean that we should surrender our own morals, our own ethics, our own compassion in order to exist in it. Now, $840 odd. Well, it doesn't amount to much, especially to men like we've been discussing. But when you multiply it by how many patients and how many people are underwritten by the Carl system as individuals, that becomes a huge amount. Just don't tell me that I can't manage my money. Because money means very little to me. It's the intent behind its use or manipulation that means everything. So be careful with what you've been entrusted with. Because all those zeros in your bank account don't make you any more or any less than anyone else under God. So that's it, folks. That's all I have to say about that. Of course, if you're feeling depressed, don't be. Disappointed, that's okay. But if you're feeling depressed or you feel like it's hopeless, I would encourage you to reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which can be reached at 988. And as soon as I can, I will put a link in the description so that you'll be able to reach out to someone if you or if someone you love also feels overwhelmed by things like this. Because the most important thing, for us is that we keep going. It's not easy, but we have to keep going no matter what, because that's the only way we win, is by continuing to be kind, considerate, compassionate, and by gently carrying and distributing that love within us. This is worth more money than all the wealth on the face of the earth. God has a place for us in heaven. But until He calls us home, we have much work to do. Try to be joyful in it. So there you go. Nothing left to say, but good luck. Godspeed. And we'll see you around town.